Oksana. So Oksana, if you have a presentation, you can share screen and then press like your camera again, so we'll see your face.
Yeah, so let me see. So I share my screen. Then
we see your screen, we see everything.
Okay,
Perfect.
Great.
There you go.
Great, then I can start. So the talk I'm giving today is about the project we actually finished up quite recently. And as Alessandro mentioned, the project is about the assessment of cybersecurity in Denmark. Now, this is a research project, so shorter asked. And this is a project financed by the Center for Cybersecurity in Denmark. It was running last year, so we just finished writing the final report in December, and now we're focusing on preparing the results for the publications in scientific venues. It's a collaboration of ITU and STU. So from STU, Chaco Pomaro is participating as a co-PI, and overall we have an interdisciplinary team because it is a project that involves studying both technical aspects of security as well as human and organizational aspects, which is why we have computer scientists and experts in software development, but we also have social scientists working on the project. And the goal of the project is to understand the cybersecurity challenges that Danish companies face in their daily work. So not just to figure out whether the situation is good or bad, but also to understand what the problems are and maybe make some first steps towards suggestions. How can we fix this problem? How can we, as research community, help? And the project has followed the methodology of the so-called mixed methods design, meaning that it had two phases. One was the online survey that we have performed in order to give some quantitative insights, so some numbers to help us figure out the trends in cybersecurity in Denmark. And the survey involved 100 and something participants from different companies. So we specifically try to target very diverse sectors, participants in very diverse roles, from management to software developers to CISOs to people who have whose job doesn't have anything to do with tech, to understand again what are their practices, what are their challenges in their workplace. And as I said, the goal was to get a broad overview, to get some numbers, to get some trends, what is going on in terms of cybersecurity in companies. So this was the first phase. And the second phase was to get some qualitative insights, so to combine the quantitative and the qualitative results. And this phase consisted of ethnographic interviews, which were done by the social scientists in the team. And the interviews involved 11 participants, again, from different roles who aimed at interviewing management, software developers, and security experts in companies, again, to see different perspectives, different views on cybersecurity issues. And the purpose was to provide some further insights in addition to numbers, so that the numbers might be able to tell us what is going on, but the interviews allowed us to gain some deeper insights to understand not just what is going on, but also why is it going on, why are the trends as they are shown in the survey, or maybe what are the problems, what are the issues that we didn't detect by the survey, but that were more prominent when we actually sat down with people and talked to them about their experience in their workplace. So we investigated a number of topics. So our broad topic was cybersecurity and privacy issues in Danish companies. We wanted to focus more on tech companies, on software development companies, but we also included, as I said, companies from many different sectors. And there was a variety of topics we talked about, and we investigated general cybersecurity, security and privacy management and policies. Again, both from the view of the security managers, so how do they decide which security policies to implement, whether they follow some standards, if not, why don't they follow standards, and what are the challenges in implementing these standards, but also from the view of non-security people who basically just are told which policies to follow, and we wanted to know, do they actually follow these policies? Is it maybe too difficult? Is it maybe not clear? Do they have sufficient trainings in the companies? So everything around this topic. Then we we investigated the views of the developers, and namely if they are developing some software products, how they actually integrate the security and practice and privacy techniques in the software development processes. Do they do it on a continuous basis? If they're doing agile, how is security is integrated in the whole agile workflows? Or is it the case that they're mostly treating it as an afterthought after the other functionalities are implemented? We talk about GDPR because, again, it was a huge issue that appeared quite relatively recently. So 2.5 years ago. And companies, we felt that companies were still struggling with this. So we also included this as a topic in our project, again, to see how companies ensure compliance with the GDPR. Do they know what they should do? Do they understand when they have some data that actually is relevant for the GDPR? And in general, what do they think about GDPR? Do they think that it is helpful for data protection? Do they think that it's harmful for their business? What are their perspectives on this? And the final topic highlighted is, of course, the topic of today's meetup is what are the experiences of people working in companies with pandemic-related changes? Because the project was started last year and more or less at the same time as everyone went into lockdown. And as Martin said, suddenly a lot of people became remote workers having to deal with this. So this was also a large part of our investigation. And because of the lack of time, I would not touch about all of these topics and all of the findings. The report is publicly available online, so you are welcome to take a look at it if you're interested. But I'm going to mention what we found out on the pandemic side. So first of all, from the quantitative part of the project, from the online survey, we asked people whether they have any increased concerns or how have their privacy, security and privacy concerns changed since the pandemic. And as you can see, actually, they didn't change much. So for the most of people, they either are not concerned, they were not concerned before, or they're not concerned now. As a large number of people, they were concerned before, but they are not concerned more because of the pandemic. And only a relatively small percentage of people actually had increased concerns because of the pandemic. So again, this was interesting for us to know because, as Martin mentioned, and as you also hear quite often right now, the pandemic actually did lead to increased cyber attacks, to increased issues with cybersecurity, but still this was not reflected in actual concerns that people had. We also asked about the policies for remote work that people have in their companies, whether people found them challenging and whether people even knew about these policies. And again, from our quantitative findings, it looked like it is actually not an issue for most of the people. People find the remote work policies either not challenging at all or mostly not challenging, only very few find them challenging. Again, this might be because people are just so good at following good security policies, but it might be the case that the policies are simply really, really basic, so people don't have any challenges because there are almost no policies. And we also asked about the experience with remote work, and here actually we can also see one of the reasons why people might not have concerns because of the pandemic or challenges with remote work options. And this is because, as you can see on the lower graph, actually a large amount of people already had experience with remote work. So this might be the case with tech companies who are maybe more used to this kind of work. And as you can see on this, on the graphs, actually people in smaller companies tended to work remotely more even before the pandemic than larger companies. So again, it ties in with what Martin said, that maybe for them not much has actually changed since everyone has to move remote. So this was the quantitative findings. So we got some numbers, we got the trends, but again, we can look at the numbers, we can come to different conclusions, which is why we had interviews, and we also asked people questions about the pandemic and how do they deal with the pandemic issues in their company. And again, a large amount of our participants said that there has been no changes in the way that the company deals with security and privacy with regards to the pandemic. So people talked about people in Denmark in general having inherent trust, meaning that they just trust people to take home their laptops, their documents, whatever they need, and not do anything reckless with this or not do anything illegal with this, but just do the right thing and more or less behave. So there was this topic of inherent trust in many of among the respondents. And then some of the respondents mentioned that they relied a lot on cloud-based services, which meant for them that a lot of services were remote already. So they didn't have to change much. Again, as Martin said, this might be one of the issues or one of the reasons why for many companies nothing has changed much. Still, there were some people who said that they had even less security concerns because of the pandemic. And the reason they provided is that they felt that working from home meant a safer environment. The reason being is that if people have to share the office, their colleagues might have access to their desk. Maybe clients coming into the offices have access to their desk. Maybe someone like cleaning staff can come to the offices. And when they're at home, they are either alone or living with people like their family, whom again they trust. So they felt like working from home is actually a safer environment in certain aspects than working in the office. Yet there were still people who did acknowledge the increased security concerns because of the pandemic. And as such, they said that, yes, they had to implement some new policies that were not quite relevant before. And they also said that security actually served as a catalyst for implementing these policies, meaning that the policies were somehow planned even before the pandemic, but after the pandemic, they were suddenly faced with this issue that they have to implement these policies right now, and they have to do it fast. So here are some quotes summarizing from the participants. So the first quote is about this question of trust. And in Denmark, it's like we trust people to take their laptop home and we don't expect them to take any company data. And the second quote is on seeing the pandemic as a catalyst for increased security, again, for implementing maybe new services, for implementing new policies, and so on. To summarize, so we have heard, again, as Martin said, as you can actually hear quite a lot if you follow the news, there are warnings about increased security risks with the pandemic. So there are reports from Interpol. There is quite a flow from the so-called corona phishing messages, where people, for example, impersonate the WHO organizations and send phishing emails to people. So this has been a thing, and there has been some increased security risks if you trust these reports. But at the same time, what we saw in our project is that people in companies, or at least a large share of people in companies, didn't really perceive these concerns as something relevant to them. So whichever security and privacy concerns they had in the organization, these were not dependent much on the pandemic. And there can be several reasons for this. Of course, the worst possible reason is that they simply don't know that there are actually risks, so they don't implement any extra measures simply because they don't feel like they are actually at risk. But maybe actually there are some better reasons. Maybe they are already sufficiently prepared. For example, if a lot of their employees were working remotely already before the pandemic, or maybe there are other reasons why people are not concerned about the security. So this remains another open research question that we might look into in our future research. All right. I think we'll have time for presentation.
Yes. Thanks a lot, Oksana, for the presentation. I think it actually ties well together with Martin's presentation. Martin talked a lot about the technical challenges that we're facing when going to a post-pandemic world where we have to move more of our work online and remote. And you talked about the actual perceptions that people have experienced across this timeline that we all suffer through. And so I think this is really interesting data, and it's cool that actually we get real data instead of just talking about stuff, and this is a great experience. So I'd like to move forward to